The Canon EOS 7D Mark II is here, and we've put it through its paces in both our testing lab and in the field. Let's take a look at the camera which sits at the top of Canon's APS-C format SLR range. The sensor inside the 7D Mark II has 20.2 million effective pixels, just like the Canon 70D, but I'm told it's a new device and that the micro lenses have been redesigned for better light transmission. Canon has also given the camera two Digic 6 processing engines, and this enables a maximum continuous shooting speed of 10 frames per second. With a UDMA 7 card, like this Lexar 1066 compact flash card installs, this rate can be maintained for up to 31 RAW files or 1030 JPEGs. The sensor and processing engine combination also allows a native sensitivity range of ISO 100 to 16000. That's the highest native setting of any Canon SLR, plus there are expansion settings going up to ISO 51200. Now let's turn to the autofocusing system. Good news for sport and action photographers is that this new camera has a 65-point autofocus system, and all of the points are cross-type. The central point is a dual cross-type at f2.8 and is sensitive down to f8, which is useful if you want to use a teleconverter with a telephoto lens. Like the Canon 1DX and 5D Mark III, there are 6 customisable shooting scenarios for use in continuous AF mode. These tailor the autofocus system to suit the subject by controlling how quickly it responds to things like changes in subject distance, objects entering the frame, and subject acceleration or deceleration. These options are useful provided that you have a clear understanding of how the subject moves, as well as the shooting conditions. Some may find a little more explanation than the camera gives helpful. You can also select one of 7 AF point selection mode options. The AF point expansion and zone modes are especially useful in continuous autofocus mode and when shooting moving subjects. I found the AF system very fast and accurate even in low light. And with the right AF point selection mode set, it does a great job of keeping up with moving subjects and tracking them around the frame. The dual pixel AF system that operates in live view and video mode also works well, and videographers will appreciate the ability to adjust the speed of focus for slower, more cinematic shifts in focus. Canon has given the 7D Mark II a more advanced metering system than its flagship 1DX, and there's a new 150,000 pixel RGB and infrared sensor, which is divided into 252 zones. I've found it does a great job of assessing exposure, and it copes better in high contrast conditions than previous IFCL systems in Canon SLRs. Other specification highlights include a built-in intervalometer, GPS technology, a compass, and a RAW file compatible HDR mode. The only disappointment is the lack of Wi-Fi connectivity. A representative from Canon Europe told me that this is because the metal body of the camera would compromise Wi-Fi performance, but I think that's a problem that could have been solved, perhaps by putting the unit here instead of the GPS unit. After all, if you have Wi-Fi connectivity, you can use a smartphone for GPS functionality. Wi-Fi connectivity would also have allowed the camera to be controlled remotely, which is useful for wildlife photographers and when you need to avoid touching the camera to minimise shake. Moving on to the build of the camera, it feels nice and solid and has seals to keep out dust and moisture. There's also an excellent textured coating over the grips, so it feels really secure in your hand. This thumb ridge gives particularly good purchase. As it's an SLR, the 7D Mark II has an optical viewfinder, and it's a pretty good one that shows 100% of the scene and is fairly bright. On the back of the camera, there's a 3-inch 1.04 million dot LCD screen, which can be used for composing videos or still images in live view mode. This shows plenty of detail and isn't troubled excessively by reflections. If you're focusing manually, I'd recommend doing so via the screen in live view mode if you can, as the magnified view makes it much easier to see that the main subject is sharp. Although the 7D Mark II makes a few changes to the control layout, users of the original 7D will soon find themselves at home. The most noticeable difference on the back of the camera is the arrival of a sprung selection lever around the mini joystick control. This acts as a kind of function controller for the main control dial. When the switch is in use, the dial can be used to adjust one of a small collection of features. I found it useful for controlling sensitivity. It's also handy for changing the AF point selection mode options. And finally, what about image quality? Although it has a lower pixel count than the Nikon D7100 and the Sony Alpha 77 II, the Canon 7D Mark II is actually able to match the Sony camera for resolution and beat the Nikon D7100 at lower and middle sensitivity settings. Noise is also controlled well throughout the native sensitivity range. But as usual, the expansion settings are best reserved for emergency situations and when the images only need to be viewed at small sizes. JPEGs captured at the 51,200 expansion maximum have luminance noise visible at most normal viewing sizes. Coloured speckling is more visible in RAW files, but it can be reduced in post-capture processing. Moving down to ISO 16000, the top native setting, results in a significant improvement in image quality. There's a noticeable increase in detail resolution and less false colour is visible in JPEG files, although images still look a little soft at 100%. Meanwhile, when all noise reduction is turned off, the ISO 16000 RAW files have a hint of coloured speckling visible when they're sized to make A3 prints. At the other end of the sensitivity scale, there's little sign of noise and images have lots of detail visible at 100%. The standard picture style on the 7D Mark II is a good general purpose setting that produces JPEGs with very pleasant colours, but the landscape option gives colours a bit more punch without going over the top and making blues or greens look artificial. Similarly, the automatic white balance setting also works well in a range of natural lighting conditions, retaining much of the warmth of sunlight and the coolness of heavy shade without overdoing things. I'm really impressed with the 7D Mark II. I think it's Canon's best APS-C format SLR to date, and it's capable of producing superb images. For more information, take a look at my full review on techradar.com.